Sandro Petrone is a foreign war correspondent and anchorman for RAI, Italian state radio and television, currently working as editor for foreign news for TG2. He is a professor of mass communication and journalism at the University of Rome La Sapienza and the University of Languages and Communication IULM in Milan and author of several works. He made his debut at the age of 18 as a copywriter in the family advertising business, Octa Marketing and Communication, ASAP, Asso Comunicazione, in which he himself gave life to an audiovisual sector. After his first experiences in private radio stations, he began his career in journalism, first with newspapers and, beginning in 1979, in RAI, where he led programs and participated in innovative projects, such as radio software in 1982, the first experiment of radio broadcasting using computers, and established an interactive circuit with listeners. From 1987 forward, he has developed wide international experience in the Brazilian Telemonte Carlo, Rede Globo as home and foreign correspondent, war reporter and anchorman. He returned to work for RAI in 1993 as anchorman and key foreign correspondent. He has been teaching mass communication since 1989 in Italy and abroad in a number of prestigious universities and international organizations, such as EJTA, European Journalism Training Association. His book The Language of the News, The Tools and Rules of Journalism, published by Rizzoli, is now in its second edition. He has cultivated a passion for the arts, particularly in the fields of music and television, since his youth as both writer and event organizer. In the 70s, Petrone was an exponent of the so-called Vesu wave, a Neapolitan cultural and musical current that was named after the Vesuvio volcano as an eruption of art and creativity, celebrated by artists such as Andy Warhol. Following legal studies, he continued his studies specializing in mass communication and interpersonal communication. As war correspondent, in 1991 he was the first Italian to broadcast live from liberated Kuwait, where he went in following the U.S. Marines. Subsequently, he covered the wars in former Yugoslavia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Libya. He was a frontline reporter during the War on Terrorism, starting from the September 11 attacks in the U.S. He reported on the political and nuclear crisis in Iran as well as the so-called Arab Spring in Tunisia and Egypt. He was also the first Italian journalist to cover major events employing his own camera during the Gulf War, the collapse of the USSR and the war in Yugoslavia. He has worked in foreign correspondence offices in New York, London, Paris, and Moscow. Presidential elections since 1992, taking long-term residence in the United States for complete coverage. As a documentary filmmaker, he won the Federcimica Award in 1988 with an investigation into high-risk factories. In 1994, his behind-the-scenes in-depth report on prostitution revealed a radical transformation of the sex market in Italy. Welfare reform, the British royal family and Italian musicians emigrated to the United States. In 1993, with the 7-episode program Antinopolis, he gave a candid picture of the state of Italian television, and in particular the political bias on information, in the midst of the Tangentopoli scandal. He has always been an adamant critic of the system of awarding public contracts and has fought for the freedom of the press and impartiality in information and for journalism as an instrument for the democratic control of institutions. This information is needed for people to live, to have a fair representation of the world in which they interact. He is a university professor and has taught in a number of schools of journalism in Italy and abroad. Beyond the current teaching at the University of Rome La Sapienza and the University IULM in Milan, he has taught journalism and communication for institutions such as the Italian National Order of Journalists, the European Journalism Training Association, EJTA, the Italian Switzerland Course of Journalism, the School of Journalism in Perugia and Bologna, the Faculty of Communication of the University of Macerata, the RAI School for Journalism and the Media Institute of Tirana. After leaving his youth as a singer-songwriter in Naples and the company of friends Edoardo Benedetto, Enzo Gragnaniello, Pino Daniele, and Jenny Sorrenti to dedicate himself to journalism, he continued to write songs, often inspired by current events or situations he encountered in the countries he visited. He writes on MySpace, "I like to tell the stories of the men and the events that serve to denounce abuse that threatens democracy. For this reason, I was a singer of the Neapolitan power movement when I could not be a journalist yet. As a journalist, I continued to compose, especially when reporting from abroad. I wrote words driven by emotions that could not find a place in television journalism.